Passion Harvest. Hello, passionate listeners and watchers. Welcome to Passion Harvest. I am Louisa, your host, International Passion Ambassador. Thank you so much for joining me, us, wherever you are in the world. I can't wait to speak to our guest today. His name is Robert L. Snow. And if you don't know who he is, Robert L. Snow is a veteran police detective who had a vivid memory as living a former life as Carroll Beckwith. Robert Snow was devoted to evidence and hard facts. He had never given any thought to reincarnation. During a hypnotic regression, he experienced a vivid awareness of being alive in 3 separate historical scenes. Remaining skeptical, he began to investigate with the intention of disproving reincarnation. Instead, diligent research and corroboration from multiple sources revealed solid evidence that he had lived a former life as Carroll Beckwith, a 19th-century American artist. His book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, tells a fascinating story of Robert Snow's transformation from skeptic to believer. Robert L. Snow served for 38 years at the Indianapolis Police Department, retiring in 2007 with the rank of captain. While at the police department, he served in such capacities as police department executive officer, captain of detectives, and commander of the Homicide Branch. Robert has been a publishing writer for over 30 years with 20 published books and over 100 articles and short stories published. This is his story and this is his passion. Robert, welcome to Passion Harvest.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. I was so excited after I read your diary. I thought it was absolutely fabulous. I know you talk about being a skeptic, but I'd love to hear briefly about how it started in your past life regression session.
Well, it's kind of started as a dare, kind of an accident. Besides being a police officer, actually, I was a police officer for 38 years, but I really never wanted to be one. Never occurred to me when I was growing up. I kind of fell into an accident. I was in the Air Force during the Vietnam War, and when I got discharged, I come home and I needed a job. And my brother was a police officer in that police department. And he said, at this time, of course, the Vietnam War was still going on, and they were desperate for officers. And so I went down and just applied because I needed a job.
Yeah.
Actually, what I always wanted to be, rather than a police officer, I wanted to be a writer. My whole life, that's all I ever wanted to be was a writer. And I thought, well, being a police officer would certainly give you ample material to work with as a writer. But people don't realize being a writer, you don't just write all the time. You also have to read. You have to read from various different sources, because being a writer, you have to see how other people handle material. In other words, if you see a passage that's really clever and really good, you want to analyze it and see how they did it, and vice versa. If something really poorly written, you want to make sure you don't do that. But so in my process of being a writer, I've also been a reader. Well, one time I belonged to a book club, and I saw a book they were offering. It was called Coming Back by Dr. Raymond Moody. And it was apparently, according to the purpose, Dr. Moody had done a number of investigations into near-death experiences and what have you. So I bought the book and read it. It was kind of interesting. He had a friend who was a psychiatrist who did past life regression therapy, and she wanted Raymond, the author of the book, to do it. So he allowed himself to be hypnotized, and she supposedly took him back to 8 past lives and all that. And he talked. The book was well written and was, very good book. But at the very end, when he talked about what it really meant, he kind of hedged and said, I don't know if this is really true past lives or just my imaginations, my subconscious, mind bringing up stuff. And that's kind of the way I felt about it. So I didn't think about it. Went on to other reading. Well, a couple of months later, I was at a party. My wife was also a police officer, and she was a child abuse detective, and her office was giving a party. And so I was at the party, and there was a woman there. She was also a police detective, but she was at the same time a practicing psychologist. And so we were talking, about various things, just making chit chat about movies we'd seen and television shows. And we got around the books we read, and I remembered this book. And I told her about this book I'd read. And she asked me what I thought about it. And I told her I thought it was just mostly a bunch of rubbish. This is just people are trying to find some excuse in this life for their bad luck or their misfortune. And so I said, again, it's just people looking for you to say, well, this is karma from a bad past life and what have you. And actually, it was kind of late in the party, and I'd had a bit to drink, and I think I really belittled it so much that she got kind of, not angry, but kind of a little irritated. I mean, I didn't realize at the time that she used past life regression in her practice.
Right.
So anyway, finally she kind of dared me. She says, "Well, if you think it's a silly, try it yourself and see." And I first said, "No, I'm not going to do that. No." Then she got, "Oh, you're scared. Nah, you don't want to ask a man if he's scared, or especially a police officer."
Then you have to do it.
I finally agreed to do it. But then the next day, after sobering up and feeling a little more clear-headed, I said, "I'm not doing this. This is stupid. I'm not going to do it. It was foolishness." But every time I'd run into this lady, the detective/psychologist, she'd ask me, "Have you made the appointment?" Because she had given me the name and number of a friend of hers who also did past life regression, and suggested I go to her to try it out. And I'd always make some kind of excuse. Now, I had 2 meetings and I had to get the report ready, and I'm going to do it. But the funny thing is, I hadn't run into this woman. I'd run into her at the most once a month before this. It seemed like after this, every day I'd see her somewhere. And it's got, oh God, you see her there. Oh God, you're going to have to make some other excuse again. And it seemed like I couldn't avoid her. I just every day it seemed like I'd see her walk down the hall, and I know she's going to ask me. So finally, I just got I thought, this is stupid. So I went ahead and just made the appointment. I thought, well, I'll make it. But by this time I was kind of irritated. I thought, well, I'll make an appointment. I'll go there, and then I'm going to record it all, and I'm going to show this detective/psychologist how foolish the whole thing is. Because at the time, I didn't really think I could be hypnotized. I thought I was much too strong-willed. So anyway, I did go ahead and make the appointment and went and seen her friend again, she was a psychologist who did, besides regular therapy, also past life regression therapy.
Yeah. And obviously you were very skeptical during the session. I just have to say, Dr. Raymond Moody's been on the show.
Oh, right.
But obviously you went to the session very skeptical and thinking you couldn't be hypnotized. What happened?
Well, again, I decided that I was going to cooperate 100%. The lady I went to was Mary Ellen Griffith. Just nice lady, very nice lady. She's very gracious when I came in, and then she didn't ask me why. I just told her. She asked me if I had any problems. I said no. I just think that past life regression is interesting. I want to try it. And she didn't seem to have any problems with it and all that. And again, so we sit and talk a bit. But she said, okay, so we're going to start. So anyway, we went through. Gosh, I don't know how long she did a lot of imagery. She told me, okay, tell me about your college graduation, and imagery. Tell me all about it. Tell me about something happened in high school, then something happened in grade school. And I could see where she was going. We was going there younger and younger. And I was being nice and I was cooperating, but I thought this is really silly. Because again, I still didn't believe I could be hypnotized. I didn't think that was possible. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so finally she said, okay, now imagine a balloon. Now I'm sitting on this couch in her office, and but my eyes closed. Now the window's to my right, and I could see a purple blob, but I knew it was just the sun coming through the windows on the right. And I said, yeah, I can see a purple balloon. And she said, okay. She said, now imagine you take the balloon up. I'm going along with everything because I want to cooperate so I can prove to the detective that this is all foolishness. Nothing, it didn't work. So I try to imagine myself getting the balloon going up. And anyway, so she said, see yourself travel. I said, look down, see what you see. Now, interesting enough, I looked down and I looked like I could see little spots of light below. But I thought, well, that's probably just, glare off the floor. It's not really anything, but it looked like little spots of light below. So anyway, I'm contending, I'm a cooperating. I'm imagining what she says to imagine. And she says, oh, anyway, she says, okay. Now says, reach up above you and there's a release. I'll take the balloon down. We're going to land and we'll see what we see. So I tried to imagine it, but then nothing happened. And we went through this at least a dozen times to try and now pull the release. And I do it. Nothing. I wasn't going to make up anything. I mean, this was her daydream, not mine. So I was tremendously skeptical. But I kept trying to imagine it, but nothing happened. And we went through this for at least 10 minutes or so. Her trying to get me to bring the balloon down. Nothing happened. And I thought at that time it was kind of confirmation of what I had thought, that this is all silly foolishness. That it's basically people making up things, think they're hypnotized just to please the therapist. So anyway, she did, but interesting enough, Dr. Griffith didn't seem to least bit perturbed about it. She said, okay, no problem. Okay. Finally, she said, okay, apparently you don't want to land in these places. She said, now see if you can imagine a mountain. Now, by this time, I've been sitting at least 20, 25 minutes on her couch, which was an incredibly hard couch. But I hadn't moved, and I was really stiff and starting to ache a little bit. And I thought, so all of a sudden, I could see a mountain. And that wasn't a clear vivid, it's more like a daydream type thing. I could see a mountain. And I said, okay, I can see a mountain. She said, okay, I'll take the balloon over to the mountain. So I tried to imagine taking the balloon over to the mountain. She said, okay, now land. And I tried to imagine, and actually I did land this time. I thought, okay, I can do that. So anyway, she said, okay, what do you see? Now, interestingly, she said, there's a cabin here. Can you see it? And interesting enough, I could. It was a log cabin, but the logs are going vertical rather than horizontal. Mm-hmm. And a reader of mine later wrote me and told me that was a French method of building log cabins. I didn't know at the time. But anyway, she said, okay, go into the cabin, and what do you see? So I go in, I don't see anything. Again, I'm still thinking this is her daydream, not mine. I don't see anything. So she said, okay, try to imagine a large meal and, and bright lights. And I'm doing all that. I'm trying to cooperate. So she finally said, okay, we're done here. We're going to walk down into this valley. Said, there are 12 steps. Said, we're going to walk down and we'll count the steps as you walk down. And so she starts off with 12. And she starts doing this thing. Each number's getting longer. 11, 10. I'm thinking, oh God, this is like a stage hypnotist. I'm thinking to myself how it's this is almost ridiculous. I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here?
When's it going to finish?
So silly. What am I doing here? So anyway, she counts down, and finally we get down to 3, 2, 1, and we hit 1. Something really bizarre happened. I was in a valley. I mean, I knew I was still sitting in the seat. I could still feel the couch under me. I could hear traffic outside the window right. But at the same time, I was in a valley, and it was as vivid as any true life. I looked around, and I was walking along the valley, and I could see the trees. Funny enough, I could feel a wind blowing in my face. I figured at the time it was just air conditioning in her office. But I could look, and I stopped and looked at the leaves. I could see the veins in leaves. It was so vividly clear.
Right.
And Dr. Griffith said, okay, now look down. Well, look down at yourself. What do you see? Now I looked down and I saw a pair of really dirty, gnarled feet and some really dirty, nasty fur. And in my left hand, I'm carrying looks like a big piece of a tree limb. Everybody knows what cavemen look like. Mm-hmm. Now I knew what it was. I mean, this is everybody's seen movies and TV programs. I knew what this was. Now it was obviously some kind of caveman. I didn't realize till later when I listened to her recording again that before this she had told me to go back to the very first life I had lived on Earth. Go back to my very first existence. I didn't remember the time, but apparently, according to when I listened to tape, I found that's what she had said. So anyway, I walk along this valley, and I described it to Dr. Griffith. Then suddenly, I find myself, I'm saying things I don't know I'm going to say. It's like they just blurt out my mouth, and it's obviously the person whose bio I'm having speaking.
In English.
All of a sudden, I tell Dr. Griffith, "This is my home. I live here." And I thought to myself, "Why did I say that? I don't know where this place is at." And I pointed. I said, "There's a cave up on the hill, up on the side of the hills where I live." And Dr. Griffith said, "Okay." They said, "Go to the cave." Now it's a funny thing. I didn't walk to the cave. I didn't. All of a sudden it'd be 2 or 3 seconds of kind of that gray fog. Next thing I knew, I was standing at the entrance to the cave. Mm-hmm. The funny thing is, I started walking in the cave, and I had this awful smell. I mean, whoever lived in this cave was not very hygienic. Now, I couldn't imagine where that would come from. It was really a disgusting smell walking into this cave. So I described the cave to Dr. Griffith. And again, it's a funny thing. I wasn't scared or, anything like this or what was going on. I knew, but now this time I was smart to realize that I had been hypnotized. I ain't that big a dummy. I knew that I had been hypnotized, and this was hypnosis work on my mind. But again, I didn't think it was anything supernatural. I thought this is simply my mind under the control of hypnosis, and I'm just basically seeing things that I've seen somewhere else before. This is out of a movie or out of a book or some kind of experience. I'm just repeating it for Dr. Griffith. So anyway, she's fine. Said, "Okay, I want you to go to your death. Go to your death and tell me what you see." So again, there's just a couple of minutes of kind of gray fog. And next thing I know, I'm not in the body anymore. I'm floating above in the cave. I'm floating. I see a little scrawny man laying on the floor of the cave, and he's wrapped in furs. And he's really coughing really hard, coughing really, really hard. I knew he was dying. So I described everything to Dr. Griffith. She said, okay, now go out the cave and look up in the light. Do you see anything? Look up in the sky. I'm sorry. Do you see anything? I said, yeah, there's a real bright light in the sky. She said, okay, go to that. Before I went to that, again, I just blurted out that this life was a bad life because I didn't have anybody, that I was alone this whole life, that nobody didn't have anyone. So Dr. Griffith said, okay, I tell you what, go to a life where you did have someone. Go to a life where you had somebody important. So I fly up into the light, and there's maybe 4 or 5 seconds of gray fog. And the next thing I see, it's funny. It's kind of like a movie that's out of focus. You can't really see a whole lot of what's going on. Then suddenly it snapped into focus. I see I'm walking along a street. It's in a big city, but it's not the present time because there's gas lights and there's horse-drawn carriages going by, but a lot of tall buildings. But interesting enough, it was a summer day, and I could feel the sun beating down on me. I could feel the heat of the sun. And I'm in a little closed, dark office. I know what this is. This is hypnosis. And truthfully, I was really enjoying it this time because it was kind of like one of the greatest rides you ever went to an amusement park. You can go to an amusement park and they have virtual reality rides and they look real. They really do look real, but they're not. And that's why I thought, this is fun. And she said, okay, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to meet a woman. She said, okay, now you've met up her. Who is it? And I described the woman to her and everything. And I said, we're going to a cafe. So we walked to a outdoor cafe and I sat down and she said, what do you order? I said, I order wine and she orders kind of special water. So I just talked about this while. She said, okay. She says, go forward 5 years in your life. So I go forward 5 years and I'm in a hallway of an apartment. I'm arguing with a woman who I felt at the time, I told her it's my wife. I'm arguing with her. And we're having some kind of, I don't know what we're arguing about, some kind of argument. I just stormed away and walked down the hall. And I walked to the room and it's an artist studio. There's a hole on the right, the whole wall on the right, there's all solid windows and there's a skylight above me. And the place is just filled with dozens of portraits and paintings. The walls are just covered with. So obviously I wasn't a terribly successful painter because I had a lot of unsold paintings there. So I described in my studio to Dr. Griffith and everything and what I saw and everything. Dr. said, okay. So now go 5 years in the future. So I go another 5 years. And I'm at some kind of party. I don't know what the party's for, but everybody's come up and congratulate me. Everybody's come up, just tell me congratulate me. Everything. I have no idea, but I could feel the person's body as inhabited, the artist's body. He was really happy. That this is one of the happiest moments of his life, and you could feel that. And I couldn't, I had no idea what he was happy about, but I could feel the happiness. So anyway, I described this to Dr. Griffith, and she's fine. Says, go ahead, 5 years, and I didn't do it. You think about your life, how many times do you ever experience total happiness, total joy and happiness? I want to stay a little longer. That's the interesting part about hypnosis. Stage magicians would think you're completely under control of the hypnotist, that you'll dance around and cluck like a chicken. That's not really true. I mean, you still have control. In this case, I stayed for a few minutes at the party. Even Dr. Griffith kept telling me, go 5 years, go 5 years. And I didn't. But finally, I finally went ahead 5 years, and I'm at an apartment. I say, she said, I want you to go. She said, I want you to go. No, I'm sorry. I went to some gardens first. But then later on, she said, I want you to go to your death. She says, go to your death and tell me what happens. So I see myself in an apartment and I've died. And she said, okay, now what? And I see myself rising up out of the body and going through the city. Now, everybody's seen movies where people die, the ghost comes out of your body. I'm thinking, that's all this is. I've seen this in movies 100 times. So I die, and I come up out of the body. And Dr. Griffith says, what was your greatest regret about this life? I said, I regret that your wife and I didn't have children, but my wife couldn't have children. She said, okay. She said, now, go into the light. Now I look around, and I'm over a huge city. I mean, this is a huge, huge city with just, the mile, you see lights for miles in every direction. And she said, oh, good light. But I didn't. Again, I didn't. I did what I wanted to do. I saw myself flying through some woods. I could tell that it was looked like a cold fall night because the trees still had their leaves, but it looked really cold and brisk night. And a few moments later, I'm at a big mansion, and I'm floating, and I'm looking through the window on the second or third floor, and there above a fireplace is a painting. And I told her I wanted to look at one of my paintings one more time before I went. and it's a still life painting. And I described the painting to Dr. Griffith. It was a still life with a big sun in the background. So finally after that, I did go into the light. She said, okay, now I want you to go to a life that you experienced as a woman. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, that's going to happen. Yeah. Said, I want you to go back to when you're a woman. So next thing, there's about 4 or 5 seconds of gray fog. And sure enough, I'm in another body. But I looked down, and this is a woman's body. And I thought, oh, hell. Because I really thought, no, this is not, how can you imagine that? Now, I mean, it's one thing about, just imagine being a ghost or a caveman. Everybody knows that. But how did I imagine I'll be a woman? But I looked down, I could see my body was at a woman's. And I'm standing in front of a monument, some kind of monument. It's a pretty good sized building, circular with pillars. And all of a sudden, again, like in the previous lives, I started saying things, the things I didn't know I was going to say. And I talked about how this is my job. I work here. I bring things down to the altar. So anyway, we go through a long discussion with Dr. Griffiths today, and we go through move forward. And finally, I see myself after the job at the altar. I'm in a wagon with an ox-driven wagon with an old man. And I look to my right, and there's a little girl, about 4 or 5 year old girl sitting there. And again, I didn't know who it was, but in my life, then the body was occupied, I knew it was my daughter. But interesting enough, it was someone I recognized from this life. It was my stepdaughter from this life. But she wasn't age. At that point, I had the regression. She was a teenager. But when I looked down at her, she was the same age she was when her mother and I got married, just a little girl. So anyway, I went to this farm with this old man, and he died pretty quickly. And so I was kind of, and in those days, I don't think women had much rights to any kind of property and what have you. Now, next thing I do, I'm taking my daughter back to the altar, and I'm giving her to the altar. Now I'm trying to justify to Dr. Griffith why I'm doing this, how her life would be so much better there. They take care of her. But I knew in my heart, at least the person bodies I'd have, that I was abandoning her because life would be a lot easier for me without a little kid tagging along. How much easier it'd be just, without a little kid to worry about. But all the time I'm trying to justify Dr. Griffith how this is so much better for her. They'll take care of her, she'll have a home and all this kind of thing. And I basically abandoned her there. And so I see myself, when she said go 20 years in the future, I see myself in a village next to a large body of water, and I work with fish. Somehow I work with fish. So anyway, Dr. Griffith told me, he says, okay, go to your death. And so I found myself drowning. It was that was kind of a scary feature because I could feel myself. I was caught in some nets, and I could taste salt water. And right at that moment, I could taste salt water. I thought, that is really bizarre. And anyway, I ended up drowning. But at that time, I was kind of glad that I lived life because I felt this tremendous guilt, this awful guilt on me about abandoning my daughter. And I'm thinking to myself at the time, how silly this is. This is all make-believe and all that. But I still felt a tremendous guilt about abandoning my daughter at the altar. So anyway, Dr. Griffith said, okay, now I want you to go back to the most previous life before you were a Bob Snow. Go back to life you were before you were present one. So again, there's 3 or 4 seconds of gray fog. And all of a sudden I'm in the same artist studio. And I realize I'm the artist again. And I'm painting a portrait. I'm in the same studio painting a portrait. But interesting enough, it was a portrait of a hunchback woman. Interesting. I thought, well, how many paintings of hunchback women have you ever seen?
Yes.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about the regression though, it was so clear. I could see every brushstroke of the painting. And I could see I was just about done. I could see every single brushstroke about it. And I remember telling Dr. Griffith, I'm doing a portrait. I hate doing portraits. I hate them, but I need the money. I really hate doing portraits, but I need the money. So anyway, so we talked about this and I described it. And so we went on to the next, she said, go 5 years forward and so on. And I go and I see myself in this really heated conversation with someone about poor lighting for my painting. About I'm having some kind of exhibition. I'm arguing with somebody who's in charge about how bad the lighting is for my painting. So I talked about this for a while, and then she said, "Okay." She said, "Now go to the so forth. So another 5 years." So another 5 years, I'm in a garden, and I can hear piano music coming from my house outside the garden, just outside the garden. And I described Dr. Griffith. She said, "Where are you at?" And again, I didn't know where I was at, but I just immediately said, "I'm in France." Whoever the artist ever knew where he's going. So I walked into the house. There's my wife playing on the piano with a bunch of friends standing. She's playing the piano, but her friends are standing around. So anyway, I talked about this. Dr. Griffith finally said, okay, Now go 5 years in the future to what you see. So anyway, between this I'm in the gray fog again, waiting between, and all of a sudden I feel overwhelmed. I mean, it's like a ton of bricks on my chest, and I just blurt out. I blurt out, she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. Now I have no idea who I'm talking about, but I knew it was a person extremely important to the artist because I felt this intense grief, this awful grief that this person was so important that died. So anyway, after I said this, all of a sudden the recorder we're all clicked off with a raw click, no eyes, and that was it. It was over. Now I'm kind of embarrassed in a way because I went there feeling so certain that I couldn't be hypnotized, and not only had I'd been sitting there babbling for at least a half hour, about stuff that was foolish. I thought at the time, still thought time is foolishness,
Just your imagination.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought, no, when you're hypnotized, you access your subconscious mind. Mm-hmm. And I thought these are old memories from this life that have been reordered into a story and brought up so that I could make a story for what Dr. Griffith's talking about. I didn't believe any of this is real. Certainly not. Of course it couldn't be real. But at the same time, I was so flustered, mainly because the regression was so vivid. I didn't realize that I had a full sensory, what they call a full sensory regression, which apparently is pretty rare, where you not only see and hear, but you can taste, feel, touch, smell. But anyway, the problem with it is everything was so vivid. I mean, it was as vivid as real life. I mean,
they often say that about past life memories.
It was extraordinary.
Not only that, but you can relive them. They're always there in your memory. You can relive them vividly over and over again.
Yeah, the point was it's no longer my subconscious. It's now in my regular memory. And so you're right. And actually for, maybe 4 or 5 years or so after it, I could close my eyes and still see the painting, like the painting Hunchback Woman. After I could still see every brushstroke. For several years afterward, I could close my eyes and still see every single brushstroke. So again, I didn't know. I wasn't sure what to do. I really wasn't. So I basically just because Dr. Griffith wanted to talk about how you recognize how this affects your present life, and I really did in the moment. I just muttered something, to her, and I had to get it. I just want to get out of there. I need to think. I need to think this over. So I basically just muttered stuff and got out of there. And so I went out and sat in my car for a while, and I'm trying to think, it wouldn't have bothered me if it had been all blurry and fuzzy, and everything wouldn't bother you at all. But you think this is just stupid memories. But the point was, everything was just so vivid, so clear.
Yeah, it's like a photo you can keep bringing up.
And I didn't know what to make.
I just want to ask you, when you're imagining yourself, or probably not when you're remembering yourself as these lives, did you see yourself from above, or were you actually integrated in that person?
It depends. It depends. Like I said, when I'd go to my death in the caveman, I was from above. Mm-hmm. But now, other than that, I was in the body of most everybody else. The only one I really did an out of body thing on was the caveman. The rest of them was pretty much in the body. And
during the point of your death, what feelings or emotions were you experiencing going to the light?
I didn't really feel anything. A lot of, like I said, the caveman, I wanted to get out. That was a bad life, so I was happy to leave it. The altar girl, I was particularly glad to leave that one because I felt this awful guilt. Once you went to light, of course, the guilt and everything is gone. I didn't feel any particular emotions. I didn't feel, sad or, anything like that. Basically, I just went into it and started with the next one.
And then going towards the light, do you have any memories after that?
No, again, you have just 4 or 5. What I have is 4 or 5 seconds. It's like gray fog. You really couldn't see much of anything. You're in a real dense fog. You don't really see anything. Then the next scene starts coming. But again, it never came in immediately sharp. The next scene after you come out of the fog would always be kind of blurry. After maybe 3 or 4 seconds, all of a sudden just snap into clarity.
And then you're sitting in, I know what happens, but afterwards, is the word a little bit obsessed to find the artist?
Well, I don't. What I told myself after it's done is that this is just subconscious memories of things you've seen in this life and done. You just need to forget about it, Bob. It was just an interesting experience, certainly, but you need to forget about it. It doesn't really mean anything. But the problem was I couldn't stop thinking about it. I mean, it was the problem again being that I could taste the salt water, I could feel the sun, I could smell the cave. That's not an ordinary memory. It's and everything again. If I close my eyes, I can still see the scenes completely, all the scenes completely. And it started to bug me because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I would think about it all day long. For at least a month or so afterward, I mean, I could not, every minute, every day, it's like I was thinking about it. I couldn't shut it my mind. And it started to worry me because as a police officer, I've seen people with obsessions, serious obsessions, and believe me, it seldom turns out good. And I thought, well, Bob, what you need to do to get rid of this obsession, to find one of those two paintings. If you find the still life or the Hunchback Woman painting, you will remember where you saw them at. Because you saw them in this life somewhere. You just don't remember it because it's probably just you're passing somewhere and glance at them and go on. Or maybe there's a little blurb of the artist down below and you read about this artist. That's how you knew other things about him. And so I thought, well, Bob, if you could find one of these two paintings, that would explain everything. And then you'll realize this is nothing supernatural. This is nothing spiritual. This is simply your old memories coming back to you. And so what I decided to do is I was going to go to and unfortunately now this, excuse me, this was pre-internet days. And so in pre-internet days, you just didn't put
Google.
Google something. You didn't simply look at the Hunchback Woman and put it in the search engine. You had to go to the library and take books off the shelf and study them. So what I did, I went to the Public Library, went to their art section. They had, I didn't realize at the time how many books they had, a lot of art books. And I started going my lunch hour every day and going through all their art books. I was sure I would find one of these two portraits, with two paintings, because I'm not much of an art aficionado, but I figured they had to be halfway famous or I wouldn't know about them. And so I basically went there and I started looking through the art books. I started thumbing through them until I thought I'll find them. Sooner or later, the still life or the Hunchback Woman painting will show up. I'll say, oh, okay, I saw that, this small art showing, 2 years, 10 years ago, what have you. Then everything falls into place. Well, it took me better than a month, and I went through every single art book, and I didn't find either one. Now that really started to bug me. I thought, well, maybe they don't have a big enough collection here. So I started visiting bookstores around Indianapolis, and I started going to the bookstores and look at their art books. And I did that probably not, still didn't find it. Then I finally started calling some galleries and talking and described the paintings to them. And I found an interesting thing. In the pre-internet days, there was no listing of paintings. You had to basically know where a painting was, or there'd be, unless if it was a Renoir or a Van Gogh or something, they would know where it's at. But a lesser painting, there was no central listing of them. So I wasn't sure. I went through everything trying to find these things. It was a 3 or 4 month investigation trying to find them.
And this is what you specialized in anyway as a detective.
That's what really bugged me, because I thought this would be an easy case. This wouldn't be that hard a case. And I've been working investigations for a while, and so I thought this should be easy to solve, but it wasn't. Because I tried it. I even went to a New Age bookstore in Indianapolis, and to find some books.
That was adventurous.
Yeah, I went in disguise, needless to say, but I didn't tell them it was. But I went there and I got some books on past life regression to see if maybe there's something to explain what I saw and how it came to do. And I found that a lot of people had very similar experiences to mine. But more than that, at the back of those books, they had a script for a self hypnosis that you could do it yourself. And that sounds good, but believe me, that's a lot harder to do than you think. So I tried it maybe half a dozen times. And twice while I was doing it, I feel myself going into the same state I was in Dr. Griffith's office. But it only lasted for maybe 3 or 4 seconds. I would see the number 1917. Then it just clicked off. It just blop, you'd be out of it again. Twice I saw the number 1917. That's all I saw. But finally, to tell you the truth, I told you I was in charge of homicide for a number of years in Indianapolis, and we had a really good clearance rate here, but that still doesn't mean we solved every case. There are some cases we simply did not solve because they could not be solved. We just didn't have the evidence to solve them. And so I figured what you do with these cases, you simply deactivate them, which doesn't mean they're going to be forgotten about. That means they go into the shelf until new evidence comes in. And when new evidence comes in, then you reopen the case. So I thought this was going to happen in this case. There's just no evidence. There's not enough evidence. I can't solve it. So I was going to put it on the shelf and just forget. I said, Bob, there's nothing more you can do. Put it on the shelf. Forget about it.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds good. It didn't work. I still thought about it all the time. But anyway,
and you didn't have anyone to talk to about this?
No, I didn't have any. I mean, who you talk to about this? Come on. I mean, who do you really talk
Well, I
to?
guess you don't talk to your detective colleagues
No, you
about
don't
this.
talk to the detective because this is silly, because they look at you like, okay,
They think you're
yeah,
going crazy.
yeah, they think, yeah, you've been drinking or you've been crazy one or two. I didn't even talk to my wife. I didn't even talk to my wife about it. She was probably one of the best detectives I've ever met. She's an excellent detective, but I didn't even talk to her about it because I thought she'd feel the same way. So anyway, about a month after this, my wife, it was coming up to our anniversary, which in April, and we decided that year to go somewhere that neither of us had been before. So she called me one day at work and says, "What do you think about going to New Orleans?" I thought, well, that's not a good idea. I'd never been to New Orleans. She hadn't. I had a friend who I'd met at a writers conference who lived in New Orleans. I thought, well, we can go down there and look around, have a good time. So we booked a trip for New Orleans for our anniversary. So we flew down there, and it was it was in April, so the weather wasn't really terribly muglish or anything. If you go there another time of year, it's really hot. But anyway, we had a good time. My wife is a real history buff, and if you go, you can't throw a rock in New Orleans on hitting something historical. So we did she went to a lot of plantations and a lot of, war, the War of 1812 battle site, things like that. So anyway, the last day of our vacation, we had, our plane didn't leave till the evening. So we had all day. And I had noticed when at nighttime, we used to go down to the French Quarter and go visit, hear all the bands and visit some of the bars and what have you. And I noticed on our way every night to French Quarter, all kind of little neat shops at the French Quarter, memorabilia shops, art galleries, antique shops. So I told her, well, when we spend the afternoon for our plane leaves, it's just going to visit these shops in the French Quarter. And she thought it was good, so like a good idea. And so we did. We spent the afternoon. We visited these historic memorabilia shops, antique stores. We finally got to Royal Street. In those days, in Royal Street in New Orleans was art galleries.
Right.
And so we started walking in, and it's funny. They had some beautiful, beautiful paintings of these things. Of course, much more than I could afford, certainly. But anyway, we started walking down, and I noticed as we walked down Royal Street, the galleries kept getting smaller and the paintings more obscure. Anyway, we finally get to the shop at the very end of the street, and we walk in, and it's a two-story. And it had a sign that said "Modern Art" upstairs. My wife, I never have been a fan of modern art, but she is. She went upstairs, so I'm walking along the first floor. I'm looking at paintings. I don't recognize any of the paintings, and I certainly don't recognize any of the artists. And I'm walking along, and I'm just looking and looking. And I get to the corner, and there's a portrait sitting on a easel in the corner. And I glance at it, and all of a sudden, now this was probably the most frightening moment. I was a police officer for 38 years, and I was in a lot of situations that were really scary. But I have never been this scared.
Oh,
I
Bob.
looked at it. Yeah, I looked at it. It was the portrait of the hunchback woman.
Gosh.
Now, come on. You got to think, come on. What's the odds of seeing this regression, searching for months, and to just stumble on it by accident?
Well, nothing happens by accident.
Yeah, well, I know, but at the moment,
I'm
trying to explain this to myself.
The head of homicide detective, and then you were shocked by
it doesn't make any sense. I mean, believe me, police officers don't believe in coincidences. Whenever you have an investigation, whether there's a startling coincidence, it's almost always something made to look that way by somebody. It's actually something they have done. But you're thinking, okay, who could have done this? If it's not a coincidence. And I'm just staring at this painting, and I just can't believe it. I mean, I've never been that frightened, because in police work, I mean, yeah, you go to a lot of frightened situations, but you who have training and experience to know what to do.
You're prepared almost.
You're prepared, and you know what their response is like to be, what your response should be. I had no. I mean, how do you deal with this? I mean, I had no experience, no training. I'm sitting there just flabbergasted. I'm thinking to myself, maybe you're not here, Bob. Maybe you're in a nursing home somewhere with wires and tubes and everything, and you're just daydreaming this. I mean, come on. What's the odds that this could happen? I just kept staring at it. The thing was, then I told myself, well, no, Bob, this looks like the painting. It looks pretty good, but it's not the same painting. But as I said, in those days, I could close my eyes, and I did. And I could see every brushstroke. When I closed my eyes, opened up, and it was the painting. And I'm just stumbling. I'm just grasping for some explanation for this. There's got to be some rational explanation for this, but I could not come up with it. Fortunately, after I was looking at it there for a whole 3 or 4 minutes at the painting, the salesman sees me and comes up and says, "I bet you're thinking how nice to look over your fireplace." I think, yeah, that's all I want. Picture of a hunchback woman I don't know over my fireplace, but I didn't say it. I said, "I don't recognize the artist. Who's the artist on this?" And he told me, he said, "Well, come over. I got a little bio on him."
So you're acting really cool and calm at this point.
Yeah, I wasn't cool, Tom. I was sweating. I was sweating rivers, and I was shaking. I mean, he must have thought I was really excited. I really love this painting. And I was a nervous wreck. So anyway, he took me over and he searched his desk and he finally found it. And it was maybe a quarter type page. It said the man's name was J. Carroll Beckwith. And of course, I'd never heard that. I'd never heard of J. Carroll Beckwith. No, he was no. But anyway, then he said, and I looked at it and I could see some things that I recognized. That number one, he died in 1917. And I remember seeing the number 1917. I think, no, Bob, it's just, I'm telling myself it's a coincidence. It's a coincidence. That means nothing. Then that's also that he had been to France, which I remember telling Dr. Griffith that I was France. Mm-hmm. He's won some awards for his painting, and I remember being at a party for getting some kind of award. And even there were 5 different confirmations of what I'd seen. And I'm still telling myself, Bob, no, there's some logical explanation for this. But the nice thing was I realized now I had information. I knew who this person was and when he was born, when he died. And I could go back to Indianapolis, look him up, and then I'll remember where I saw the information from.
So you didn't buy the painting?
Oh, no. I think it was like $5,000. I'm sure that's what I'd spend $5,000 for painting, get it home, then find out, oh yeah, I saw this 4 years ago, at some art place. Mm-hmm. Now I'm stuck with a $5,000 painting of a hunchback woman I don't know. Okay. Now my wife would have killed me. She would have killed me, and I wouldn't blame her. Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't buy it because again at the time I've had a number of my readers write me and say, why did you buy the painting? Well, I mean, the point was at the moment I still believe there had to be some explanation. Yes. That this was not past life thing. This was just some kind of. There had to be some explanation for this. I had seen this painting. Now, me running into it in New Orleans, yes, it was certainly wild. That was wildly coincidental. But I still believed I had seen it somewhere in this life, and I have just remembered it. So I thought, well, now I got the information on Beckwith. I'll go back to Indianapolis. I'll go to the public library, and then I'll find out, all about it, and I'll remember where I saw that. So we left, and I went back, and of course I went to the library immediately after we got back to Indianapolis. Interesting enough, the librarian helped me because those days again there was no internet. You had to find stuff, and she found some stuff, but got it all together wouldn't have been a half a type page. And she basically said, look, Beckwith was just not a very famous painter. He wasn't that good, and he wasn't that famous. He has no landmark paintings everyone's seen. He was basically a portrait painter who made his way in life by painting portraits of rich people.
And what was his nationality?
Yeah. And that was it.
He was American?
Yeah, he was American who lived mostly in New York City. He was actually born in Missouri, in Hannibal, Missouri, the birthplace of Mark Twain. But he lived for his childhood in Chicago, but then all the adulthood was in New York City because it turned out when I started looking up his history that his family, of course, his dad was fairly well off. They were pretty. His dad was a wholesale food wholesaler in Chicago, and they lived in a nice house and everything. But actually, there's enough. The 1871 fire in Chicago, the one about old Larry's cow knocking over the lantern and burning the Chicago down. Of course, that's his fable. But actually, there was a terrible fire, and it burned his house and his dad's business down. And so his dad arranged for him to go live with an uncle in New York, and that's how he's got to like New York. So anyway. The librarian in Indianapolis said, look, we don't have much here, but said, you need to go up to the art museum. They have a library there, a much more extensive library. You'll probably find more information about him up there. I thought, that sounds like a good idea. And so I drove up there and went to their library. And they did have a little more information, not a whole lot, but they had a little more information. And what happened is, all the information they have, I'd find one more fact that was true. Now I kept, this time I'm really disoriented and confused because these things, all these things I saw are true, but I'm still telling myself they're true because somewhere you saw this painting, you saw a little bio of the artist, and that's why they're true. Because like I went to the library, they found out that he died. I told you I thought he died in the fall. We died October 24th. I said I thought he died in a large city. We died in New York City. And it's these kind of things. There's one little affirmation after another, but it's again. I'm telling myself, no, Bob, no.
I've seen this somewhere. It's not.
I've seen this somewhere. But anyway, because when I'm at the art museum library, She said, by the way, I have a booklet from one of art exhibition that was his right here in Indianapolis. And I thought, well, it was hot dog. That's it. I found it. There was an exhibition of Beckwith's work here in Indianapolis. That's where I saw that. Unfortunately, it turned out the exhibition was in 1911. So it didn't, it wasn't much value. So anyway, she said, look, he just simply wasn't that famous. So anyway, I noticed though in one of these little blurbs of information about him, it came from a book on John Singer Sargent, a very famous American painter. It turns out he and Beckwith were roommates in Paris for 5 years. They both went to art school in Paris, and they were roommates together. They knew each other. They were good friends their whole life. But the bottom of it said the information came from Beckwith's diaries, which are on file at the National Academy of Design in New York City.
Wow.
Yeah, so I thought, hot dog.
You've got to read that.
Now, and I thought, now I know where I got to find out. I got to find out because there's got to be some explanation for this, some rational explanation. So I went home and I wrote to the National Academy of Design in New York and asked if I could view his diaries. And so about a week later, 2 weeks, so I got a letter from him and said, no, his diaries are much too fragile. But there is microfilm. They have a microfilm. You can get them from the Smithsonian, the archives of Smithsonian on microfilm, as you do with the interlibrary loan. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get these. Somehow I'm going to find out how I do this stuff. There's got to be some rational explanation. So anyway, I went to the library and asked for the loan. But then after, they said, it'll be about a week or so. So I went home and got the tape out. I started listening to the tape.
The regression tape.
The hypnotic session tape. And I wrote down everything that could be proven or disproven that I had seen or said. I found there are 28 facts that are things of people, dates, places that I could be proved or not proved. But so I thought, but then at this time though, I wasn't looking for the proving factor. I was looking for one or two things that happened that were wrong. In other words, I said that Beckwith didn't have children because the wife couldn't have children. Now, if he did have children, then this is not real, Yeah. And I saw him drink wine at the outdoor cafe. Yeah. If he's a teetotaler, then this is not real. There's something wrong because you could not have something like that in a memory that was totally wrong. That's what I was looking for. So anyway,
you were ticking off the list.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, but unfortunately, this time I'd already ticked off 10 out of the 28 things as being valid. But I kept thinking, I'll find the one. I need to find one or two big things that were wrong. So anyway, so about a week later, the library called and said, your tape's here. So I went down to look at it. I didn't realize Beckwith was a very avid diary keeper. Started when he was 19, made his last entry when he was 65. It was 9 spools of tape, 17,000 pages of diary. Now, what do you do with 17,000 pages of diary?
What did it feel like, though, I mean, I guess at this point you were still trying to disprove it, but to
I was trying to read how do you
a diary that you had written.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do? I mean, so finally, I didn't know what to do, to tell you the truth, but I thought she said that in the library, also included there was an autobiography he had written. I thought, good, read that. That'll give you the facts. Unfortunately, he started the autobiography in the spring of 1917. He was living in California. He was really sick. He had endocarditis, which is an infection of the heart valves. He didn't know it at the time, but that's he had all the symptoms of it. But that's why he died of endocarditis. So anyway, so I start looking. There's nothing in that. But then, for some reason, I'm not sure why, part of his diary had been excerpted and typed, and I'm not sure why they did it. But anyway, one of the parts was talking about a summer he spent in Venice when he was out of art school. And he said he lived the whole summer on burnt eggs and wine. So I'm checked off another thing about him drinking wine.
Right. But
anyway, so you got 17,000 pages. What do you do? So I finally decided it's time to get some outside input in this. You need to talk because that's a lot of pages to read, awful lot of pages to read. So I finally decided it's time to involve my wife in this. Again, she was an excellent detective. So I finally it's time to tell her. Well, her reaction was not what I expected. She thought I was nuts. I told her what I had found and what I thought, and I was investigating, and she really thought I was nuts. She said, "No, we said you suggest that you've seen a movie or a book. There's a book about Beckwith, a movie about him. That's where we saw it. There are no. He was simply not famous. He was really just a very minor artist in those days. He simply made his money painting portraits. He didn't ever do any really landmark painting. So anyway, I told her, no, it's true. Finally, she said, okay, look, Bob, you're too involved in this. Let me investigate. So I'll look into this. I'll find where you got this information from. Now, actually, I was kind of hoping for this. This is I need because one of my biggest admonitions to all my detectives was in homicide was don't get yourself emotionally involved in your case. If you get yourself
Right.
emotionally involved in your case, you cannot see straight.
Because you're too
You really can't.
attached.
You overlook too many things. If you become emotionally involved, you overlook too many important things. And boy, I was really emotionally involved in this case. I knew that, and I'd always tell my detective, don't do it. So I need an outside person with detective skills to look at what I'd done, and to look into this case and see. I thought
And you,
that because and so my wife said she was going to do it, and I thought that was great because she was an
and she
excellent
was in
detective.
child protection, so you would really have to detach
Yeah, and she
yourself.
was even more wanting to be wrong than even I was. So anyway, she did it for about a month, but basically come up with nothing, absolutely nothing more than I had. So I'm talking, and finally she said, we sit down and talk. She says, Bob, listen to me. I couldn't find, you're right. Maybe, who knows? And maybe you have come on to something astounding here. Maybe something, but shut up about it. Police captains don't talk about this. Police captains don't go spouting off about living past lives. And, they just don't. Police captains are basically the backbone of the department. You really are the backbone because all the higher ranks, deputy chief, assistant chief, all come from the group of captains. That captain is your permanent rank. The rest of them are just appointed. You're there at the pleasure of the mayor. You can be chief for a while, then you bump back down to captain. But the captains themselves are backbone of the department. And you don't go the captains don't go spouting off this new age stuff about past life. So just shut up. And I thought about it for a while, and I thought, boy, you know what? She's
Do you
right.
listen to your wife?
Yeah, I listened to her because I thought she's right. This is going to get me in trouble. This is so. I said I'm just going to forget about it. So I sent the film back and all that. And I thought, and at that time I was writing this was actually before I started writing books. I was writing a lot of articles for various magazines, and I thought, well, I thought I was to get back to doing that again. But I'd been kind of stopped doing it while I was investigating Beckwith, and so I thought, well, I'll just start writing a magazine article. Well, I was doing a magazine article on line of duty deaths in small police departments. And so we just recently had an officer killed, and I wanted to talk to one of the officers who'd been first there to get. It was actually a police captain. She had been the first person on the scene. Get her reaction to what she felt, what she saw, and everything, so I could use it in my article. So I was talking to her, and while I'm talking to her, she tells me about having this out of body experience while she's at the scene of the murder. She says she arrived at the murder scene, and the officer's laying, and he'd been shot with the chest with the shotgun, and he was dead. Of course, he was dead. And she suddenly realized that she didn't know where the shooter was, and said the next thing she knew, she was floating above the body and seeing it. And I'm thinking, I'd been a policeman for about this time for over 20 years, and I'd never heard anybody talk about stuff like this.
You don't talk about things like that.
Yeah, I did, and she seemed very matter of fact about everything. So I was just amazed. So it wasn't maybe a couple weeks later. I'm in federal court, and we're waiting for a case. Now in federal court, because witnesses, of course, can't be in the courtroom. You're in another room, so you can't hear the evidence. Would bias your testimony. So me and another police captain, some other people sitting there, and he's talking. And he's talking about one time where he and his partner had been on a run, and they were in a drugstore, and the guy come running the drugstore. Hey, said some guys hold up the supermarket next door. You need to get over there. So he and his partner ran over there, and sure enough, there were about a half dozen guys with guns holding the supermarket up, and they started shooting at him. And of course, they backed out of the supermarket, and were having a gunfight. And he talked about having an out-of-body experience during the gunfight. And I'm just flabbergasted because I haven't heard anything like this. And all of a sudden, he's talking about how he said he thought he had died, and his soul was looking at what happened. What actually happened is they'd called for backup. The backup arrived, and they got all the bad guys. But during a shootout, he said he saw himself floating above the scene, watching what was going on. And again, I'm flabbergasted. So I started doing some real discreet inquiries on the police department. I found that the police officers, as a rule, have quite a few paranormal experiences, almost always during moments of stress. And I found some number of other cases, similar cases that's happening. And I decided, hey, this is bull. If they can talk about it and everything, and they're talking about it, they're not embarrassed to talk about it, I can talk about it Beckwith. So what I did was I reordered the microfilm, and I had it made in a hard copy. Because you only had 2 weeks with this film, and there's no way you go through that much pages. And it took me almost a year. But I went through every single page of his diary. Now, and as it turned out, I was able to prove. At first, I was able to prove 26 of the 28. There was 2 of them that were left in question. I was later able to do those. But what really what really swung me over, because I kept finding one affirmation after another. Okay, this is true. This is true. This is true. And finally, I got to December. I think it was December 5th, 1886, and Beckwith was talking in his diary that his mother was in church that day and died of a blood clot. Now I knew there were people important, women important in Beckwith's life, be it his wife or his mother. His mother was, she was kind of her favorite, and she always encouraged him in art to be an artist. His dad always said he didn't know a better way to starve to death than being an artist. His dad didn't encourage it at all, but his mother did. He loved his mother dearly. So I knew that the person who he said died of a blood clot had to be a woman important to him. And on December 5th, 1886, his mother died of a blood clot.
Gosh,
I think that was
another tick off the list.
That was one swung me over. I mean, you can know a lot of things. You can even guess things about a person. You can make some guesses. You can't guess 28. There's no way. And how in the world, other than his diary, where would his mother's cause of death ever be recorded?
Yeah.
I mean, again,
too many coincidences. I mean, they're not coincidences.
Yeah, way too many. I think that was probably the thing. When I found that entry, that just basically, that was it. I knew that where this thing was going. I was not going to find a disproving fact. And other than that, I was actually going to prove it. I was basically able to prove all 28 facts I'd looked on there. So I went back. So I basically decided this is time to write the book, and I ended up writing my book about my experience.
And you talk about in your book, it was very confronting of you to visit his grave.
Oh yeah. Well, I was in New York. Again, while I was writing the book, I got a contract for the book, and I was writing the book. So I went to New York to see if I could find some of the sites where he'd been at. There was nothing left. Everything Beckwith had wrote about in his diary was in the 1800s, early 1900s, and it was all gone. Everything had been replaced. But I found out he was buried in Kensico Cemetery, which is in Valhalla, New York, which is a suburb of New York. So I had one day left. I did my research. It was actually easier than I thought, because Beckwith had said in his diary about doing the scrapbooks. He done a lot, how he's working on his scrapbooks and what have you. I found out they were to New York Historical Society. So I thought, and he had like 10 or 12 scrapbooks, but it turned out they were mostly articles about him for places. There'd be one incident, and there'd be like 20 different articles for different papers. So going through the scrapbooks turned out easier than I thought. So I had an extra day there. I thought, well, wouldn't it be kind of fun to go visit my grave in Kensico Cemetery? I mean, come on, how many people get to visit their grave while they're still alive and their body's there? So I took a train up to Valhalla and went to Kensico. Kensico is a huge cemetery. A lot of famous people buried there. It's a beautiful cemetery. So anyway, I went to the office, got a map of where Beckwith's grave was, and started going there. And the interesting part was that it was just, I started walking, get there, and I found the grave. But I found when I got close to the grave, especially up on the grave, I got this terrible, terrible anxiety attack. I mean, it was sweating, heart beating crazy. And interesting, I found when I was a new police officer, whenever I would get into a really scary situation, my left knee would just shake like crazy. It would just shake. It really would. And this was all over again. This was me. I was sweating. I was heart beating. I couldn't hardly breathe. My left knee was just shaking uncontrollably when I stood next to the grave. And I couldn't understand this. I'm thinking, it couldn't be ghosts. Whatever spirit was in this man's body is in mine. Why would this? I couldn't understand why, but it was just unbelievable control. So I finally, what I did, I saw there were men working on some hedges, some workmen from the cemetery. So I wanted to get a picture of me standing at the grave, sure, by I wasn't scared. Anyway, so I went and asked the man, would you take a picture of me at the grave? Funny enough, when I walked away from the grave to go to ask the man to take a picture, it all left. The anxiety completely left. So I went to ask him, would you take a picture of me at this grave? So he said, sure. So I went back, and again, it's just the knee shaking, the sweating, the heart palpitation. Yeah. And it took this guy forever to take his picture. Just take the picture. And I never can figure out why that would be. I have no explanation for that. But once I left the grave, again, no problem at all. But just standing on the grave gave me the awful, terrible anxiety attack. And I have no idea. I have all people give me all these esoteric explanations for it. I don't have any explanation for it. I don't know why.
You might find out one day.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, but probably not in this life. It'll probably be as I passed on. But I have no idea why, because it's just a body there. The spirit is in that body.
Yes.
Is now in my body, and so why would you be nervous looking at a body? I don't understand it. But my body based on me, you're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be here. Leave. Because once I leave, it all go away. But I go back, it come right back.
So you have no doubt that you, in altered
How could
life
no?
was
I mean,
Carroll
there
Beckwith.
again, you can't. Yeah, there's no way. There's absolutely no way you could guess 28 things about a perfect person's life and not be wrong about a single one.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way. I mean, you can make some guesses by age and where you died. Because what I was doing, I kept making these rationalizations. For example, when I found I died in New York City, I thought, well, what does that mean? A lot of people die in big cities don't mean nothing. When I found I died in the fall, I thought, well, come on now. Of course, the people who die here died in the fall. I kept making these rationalizations myself that it didn't prove anything. But when you prove all 28, particularly like I said, for example, I said we didn't have children. My wife couldn't have children. Well, on October 24th, 1888, which coincidentally was 28 years to the day before his death, his wife had a really serious miscarriage and could never have children because of it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. You just can't guess these things.
And
You
it's
just
that
can't.
emotional feeling that you had. It was just
Yeah.
a knowing.
Yeah. You can't. You just can't guess these things. These things just don't happen like that. That'd be to guess them would be too big a coincidence to ever be a coincidence.
And your wife, how does she feel about it?
She was dead set against me publishing this book 100%. And she was she was right because it pretty well ended my police career.
It wasn't well received by the police department.
No, actually, it's kind of funny. There's two sides to it. I had maybe 15 or 20 policemen come to my office and kind of look around, make sure everybody can see them, and say, I always believe this. I'm really glad you did this. I really believed it.
Yeah.
Now the command staff, on the other hand, the chief and all the deputy chiefs didn't think this was very funny at all. They really didn't. And basically, it condemned my career at the police department. It really did. Because, again, like my wife said, police captains don't go talking about this sort of thing. The really bad thing was we have a alternative newspaper in Indianapolis called Nouveau. It basically publishes the kind of alternative news. And they interviewed about my book. Well, there's a box with a paper on it on probably every block on every corner down in Indianapolis. Well, when they published my story, they had my picture on the cover. It said Karma. And believe me, that did not go over well with the police department. They have one of their captains on the front of Nouveau saying Captain Karma. So basically, what happened is I got knocked out of homicide and put into a really meaningless job. It was that basically put people before they retire, which I was kind of got the hint that was what they wanted me to do. They put me into a real meaningless job that meant to be maybe this time for you to retire, Bob. Basically.
Right. Well, so, I think you're very brave.
It was something I had to do. Too much information I got from Beckwith just kind of fell into my lap. It's kind of like the scrapbooks. Okay, I told you he had his reference me a couple hundred times about work on the scrapbooks and diary. I could not find where they were at. Finally, I was talking to an art dealer one time about Beckwith, and actually, when the art dealer was an expert he used to authenticate art. Apparently, there's a lot of forgery in American art, and it was an art expert, and we were talking, and she said, his scrap out of the blue. I didn't ask her. She said out of the blue. She said, his scrapbooks at the historical site in New York City, don't you? And just again, information like this it's dumped in my lap. It's kind of like going to the art museum and seeing about his diaries. It kept just being dumped in my lap, and I felt. And again, it's just to me, it felt too important. This is something that I had to tell about this. It felt to me like too important a story not to talk about. Look, my wife kept saying, "Take it to the grave, take it to the grave," but I really felt it was too important.
And have you located any of his other pictures, paintings?
Oh, the Beckwith paintings. If you ever seen his paintings, they're not that great. They're simply not that good.
Okay.
And I'm not really an art expert of any type. I really don't know much about painting. I really don't know hardly anything about it, to tell you the truth. So it's hard for me to judge any kind of paintings at all, because I really have no real basis for it. Interesting enough, I've had a lot of people ask me, says, "What's the meaning of all this? What does this all mean?" And I basically tell them, that's beyond my job. My job was an investigator. I'm not a philosopher or theologian. I can't explain it. I can only tell you what happened. The explanation for it belongs to the theologians and philosophers, not me. I'm just a police officer who knows how to investigate things, and that's what I did. That was my part of the job. And beyond that, I really can't tell you what it means. That's not part of my purview to explain what it all means.
Well, it happened to you for a reason. I don't think anything happens by accident. How has it changed you?
Well, it gives me a different, there's part, finding out this is all true wasn't the real hard part. The hard part is accepting what it means to your worldview. In other words, you have to accept that everything you believed in your life up to this point has been wrong. You believe, the things you believed aren't true. There's a whole different basis for reality that you didn't realize existed. And in a way, if you think about it, reincarnation is much fairer than other systems of belief. And the fact that, okay, this life, you may have a crummy life. You really do. But you have hundreds of different lives. And some of them you'll be Donald Trump, and some of them you'll be an untouchable in Calcutta. Everybody has the spread of where you have the great lives where you're rich and you're comfortable, and you have the lives when you're not so comfortable. So it's not, because you look at people say, that's not fair. How come he has all this money, or she has all this money and all this power, all this great, and I don't? Or a person has all this talent and ability, and I don't. Well, it's one life. Yeah, you know what? The next life, you could be they have all the talent and the ability. You could have it all. So and if you look at this life, for example, I worked a homicide, and an awful lot of youths get killed. We had an awful lot of young people get killed. You think this person is 17, 18.
And you think,
they had
what
no
a waste.
life. They didn't. What they get to experience? What did they get to experience? Nothing. And it seems if you believe in only having one life, it seems really unfair, doesn't it? Or I had a number of cases where fathers and mothers would murder infants. And you think, okay, what if you believe there's only one, you only get one life? What was the point? What was the point of this infant if dad or mom murdered him? But if you look at reincarnation, it's just one of hundreds of lives. It's not as important as you think, because you go on to other lives. You do other, you immediately once you're murdered, you go on and get to another life. That makes, to me, it's a much fairer, and to me, it fits more the facts of what you see in the world. Reincarnation does than the belief that there's only one. You get one life, that's all you get, and when you're done, you're done. Because some people, you get people who are born with disabilities. People are born, or you have children who have cancer. You think, where's the fairness in that? If you're 9 years old and you're dying of cancer, where's the fairness in the world? Where if you believe in reincarnation, you realize this is just one of a couple hundred lives, or maybe more. I have no idea how many you live. I'm just assuming this. I mean, okay, what's it mean? It means, okay, you spent a life, you go on to another life where you live to your 100 this time. Who knows? So to me, there's a much more fairness in reincarnation than other belief systems.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. I was just thinking, I think it's a really interesting experience that we do experience lives with other people over and over again. You talked about your stepdaughter in this current life who you felt was your daughter.
Yeah, I don't. That was the only one. I've read a number. Actually, I really often did a little researches when I was writing the book and searching for things. An awful lot of people have lives where they experience with the person they know now, or have had several lives with some of them they know now. And it's apparently you're good friends in this life and the afterlife both. Now, my own one I saw again was my stepdaughter, and it was interesting because I abandoned her at the same age she was when I married her mother and took her as my daughter. So it's kind of like you're finishing something. You abandoned her when she was 4 or 5, and you took her back when she was 4 or 5.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
You're trying to balance things out.
Yeah,
that was the only one I recognized. Yeah, that's the way I looked at it. I mean, that's my explanation anyway.
And what does the visual image of Carroll Beckwith? Do you have any physical similarities, characteristics?
Nah, people say so. I don't know. I don't think so. Okay. I don't know. There's I'm trying to think of it. Walter. I'm trying to think. He does. He's done a number of books on people. He believes they carry their physical traits on from life to life to life. They look like each other. And I would think, what would be the purpose of that? Why would you want to keep looking the same in every life if you're experiencing different things, different experiences? But I don't think so. Other people may think so. I don't.
Yeah, that's just a personal thing. Robert Bob Snow, thank you so much for being on Passion Harvest. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the Passion Harvest audience that I haven't asked you?
No, I think I pretty well covered it, yes.
You did very well. Well, thank you so much. And I think you're very brave, and the book's fabulous.
Well, thank you. Again, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. And for anyone that's listening or watching, your details will be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
If you like this episode, please do subscribe for weekly, passionate, inspirational interviews.